Hey everyone, welcome back to another Infernomon devlog. Over the past few weeks, I've been deep in the trenches working on another update for my RPG monster collecting dungeon crawler, and that update is adding a boss fight to the first dungeon. Meet Slizzard, the Earth-type sand snake who's ready to turn your desert journey into a desert disaster. Stick around as I walk you through my progress from designing his attack animations to programming his mechanics. First up, I needed to create obstacles for the boss arena. Using Procreate, an app on my iPad, I whipped up some basic pyramid images sized at 400 by 400 pixels. Now, I'm not exactly Picasso, more like Picasso's distant cousin who can only draw basic shapes like squares and triangles, so these will be placeholders until I either improve my art skills or hire an artist with the money that I don't have. But sometimes game development is all about getting things functional before going full-on masterpiece mode. Once I was somewhat satisfied with my humble pyramid drawings, I imported them into GameMaker Studio 2. I turned them into sprites and attached them to my pre-existing dungeon obstacle object, which allowed me to avoid reinventing the wheel and reuse the collision logic and placement code I had already implemented. I strategically placed these pyramids on the boss map to create a tactical battlefield, one pyramid at the top middle, and two on the bottom corners. These aren't just random decorations, they're your lifelines when Slizzard's attacks come raining down. Also, you may have noticed the design pattern of the floor tiles and how the tiles are dark near the obstacles and walls and fade into a lighter color. This is also logic I programmed before when designing my procedurally generated dungeon rooms. It was nice to be able to reuse that code as well. Now for the start of the show, Slizzard. The boss needed to feel formidable and unique, so I created a new boss Infernomon object in GameMaker Studio 2. By leveraging the existing movement and basic attack logic, I saved time and maintained consistency with enemy behavior. Slizzard, however, is no ordinary enemy. I boosted his health significantly to make the battle last longer and add more tension to the fight. Programming Slizzard's behavior was where the fun and the challenge really began. I wanted the boss to feel dynamic and less predictable than a standard enemy Infernomon. Upon entering the boss room, Slizzard starts in idle mode, calmly waiting in place while playing an idle animation. But don't be fooled, this calm demeanor shifts as soon as you or your Infernomon approach or launch an attack. Once activated, Slizzard transitions into basic attack mode, tracking your team and dealing consistent smaller damage to keep you on your toes. But this is just the prelude. To up the ante, I added these 3 separate timers to Slizzard's code, each one dedicated to a unique special attack. The first attack is Sandblast, a powerful frontal attack that deals significant damage if you're caught in its path. The good news? It has long casting time, so you have a few seconds to scramble for cover behind one of the pyramids. This part was relatively straightforward to implement since I repurposed the attack logic from Chiropter, a fire bat Infernomon, who also has an attack that deals damage in a frontal line. The key difference here was tweaking the damage output and increasing the range of the attack to be infinite. The next attack is Sandcloud. This attack is designed to disorient and pressure players. Slizzard spawns clouds at each team member's location, which deal damage over time and lower accuracy by 50%. The clouds stick around for about 8 seconds and deliver damage every second, so staying in them is not an option. To make this attack more strategic, I ensured that if the clouds overlap, the damage stacks. This incentivized players to spread out and not take the stacking damage. Coding this was a bit more complex due to the dynamic spawning at multiple locations and ensuring the damage over time effect worked as intended. The next attack is Sinking Stones. This attack adds a layer of urgency to the battle. 3 stones spawn between the pyramids, sinking rapidly into the ground. If your team fails to pick them up before they disappear, a 50% defense debuff is applied to everyone. This forced me to fine-tune the timing and placement logic, ensuring that the player spreads out their team to collect all the stones efficiently. And now moving on to animations. Animations are where the attacks come to life, and this is my chance to flex my growing art skills. I used Procreate and followed an animation tutorial by Art with Flow that demonstrated how to animate a cauldron with smoke. I took these concepts and adapted them to create animations for Slizzard's Sandblast attack, Sandcloud, and Sinking Stones. The animations aren't perfect, but I can see noticeable improvement compared to my earlier placeholder graphics. The Sandblast has a swirling dust effect with sand cloud trails, while the Sandcloud is circular and transparent and emits smaller sand clouds. The Sinking Stones pulse slightly before disappearing to make them visually distinct and catch the player's attention. The Sinking Stones also have these arrow indicators to help guide the player towards the direction of the stones. After finalizing the animations, I imported them into GameMaker Studio 2 and replaced the placeholder sprites I had been using before. This was a satisfying step. Seeing my custom animations blend with the game's action felt like a solid leap forward. So after all that, here's a breakdown of how the boss fight will work. First, Slizzard starts in a basic attack mode for 15 seconds, following your team and chipping away at their health. After that, he launches into a Sandblast, giving you a moment to take cover. Once the blast finishes, he goes back to his basic attack for another 15 seconds before transitioning into the Sandcloud attack. The clouds force you to move and reposition quickly, adding some urgency. After another cycle of basic attacks, Slizzard spawns the Sinking Stones. If your team isn't quick enough to grab them, they'll suffer a defense buff which lasts about 10 seconds, putting your team on your heels. This cycle repeats until the battle ends. I'm pleased with how this creates a mix of offensive and defensive playstyles. You'll need to time your moves, position your team wisely, and decide when to go on offense versus when to hide or spread out. If we jump behind the scenes into GameMaker Studio 2 and take a look at the boss object, you can see in the create event, I've defined the different timer variables for each of the attacks, as well as assigned scripts to each of the different attack variables. So now if we jump over to the step event, which is code that gets executed once per frame, if the boss isn't in the idle state, then we start counting down the attack timers. Once an attack timer reaches 0, the boss enters the cast state. The cast state runs a script that tracks another timer for actually casting the attack, and once it reaches 0, it runs the designated attack script. Then inside the attack scripts, there are a few functions that trigger the appropriate functions for dealing damage, applying debuffs, playing attack animations, and so forth. Also, to make sure Slizzard looked and felt more imposing, I built test screens to compare his size against other Infernomon and characters. The first test screen shows Infernomon in their default size. The second screen places each of the different Infernomon bosses you'll fight against in the game next to their default size, which is also the size they'll be once you add them to your team. So for example, once you defeat Slizzard, you'll be able to conjure him and add him to your team. Finally, the third screen showcases the main player character alongside the student and professor characters from the magical school. Making these screens wasn't just about the bosses, it also helped me tweak the sizes of other Infernomon and characters. These adjustments ensure that no character looks disproportionately small or large in the game world. So that's it for this devlog. There's still a lot more to be done, like updating the dungeon's aesthetics, refining the mechanics, and fixing a few other bugs. But I'm proud with what I've accomplished so far. Watching Slizzard's attacks come to life and seeing how the battle mechanics encourage strategic play has been incredibly rewarding. If you have any feedback or enjoyed the behind the scenes look, please leave a comment down below. Your support means the world to me as I build my dream game. So until next time.